The galaxy was vast, filled with countless civilizations. Empires had risen and fallen, wars had been fought, and new alliances had been formed. But through it all, one name had faded into legend: humans. To most, they were nothing more than a myth, a story told by travelers and old scholars. Some claim they had once existed, long ago, before the great records of the Galactic Council. Others believed they were just a fable, a warning about the dangers of unchecked ambition. No one had seen a human. No records existed of their worlds. No ruins, no artifacts, nothing. It was as if they had never been real. Until now. The discovery. Captain Drelvik of the Salvary Exploration Fleet sat in his command chair, staring at the strange readings on the screen. His ship, the Veil Runner, had been scanning a dead sector on the edge of known space. It was supposed to be empty, nothing but cold stars and drifting debris. But something was there. "Commander," his second-in-command, Vexel, said, his voice uneasy. "The sensors are detecting an unknown structure ahead. Large, no known energy signature." Drelvik narrowed his reptilian eyes. "Show me." The screen flickered, and an image appeared. It was a ship, but not like any ship they had seen before. It was massive, dark, and ancient-looking. It floated silently in the void, hidden within the shadows of a dead planet. "No markings," Vexel murmured. "No broadcasts. No heat signatures." Drelvik felt a strange chill run through him. "Send a probe." The small drone launched from their ship, drifting toward the strange vessel. As it approached, data streamed back. It was old. Very old. But its metal hull was untouched by time. No rust. No decay. It was as if it had just stopped. And then, as the probe neared the ship, the readings changed. "What is that?" one of the crew members gasped. Drelvik leaned forward. "Energy spike." "Negative," Vexel whispered. "Something else. The ship, it's waking up." Before anyone could react, a signal burst from the unknown vessel. A single transmission, encoded in a language that no species in the galaxy had used for thousands of years. The ship's AI translated it instantly. "You should not have come here." The silence before the storm. The Veil Runner's alarms blared. The unknown ship, once dormant, began to move. "We need to leave," Vexel said quickly. "Now." Drelvik hesitated, but something deep inside him, some ancient, primal instinct, told him his second-in-command was right. "Full thrusters. Get us out of here." The engines roared to life, and the Veil Runner sped away. But as they distanced themselves from the strange ship, something even more terrifying happened. The dead sector around them was no longer empty. Shapes emerged from the darkness. Ships, hundreds of them. Silent, motionless, as if they had been waiting for someone to find them. Drelvik's blood ran cold. His voice was barely a whisper. "What have we just woken up?" The last thing their sensors picked up before they jumped to hyperspace was a final transmission from the unknown fleet. A single word: remember. The beginning of the end. The Veil Runner returned to the Salvary homeworld, but the crew was shaken. They had seen something that should not exist. Drelvik submitted his report to the Galactic Council. The response was immediate. "Do not speak of this again." His report was erased. His crew was silenced. The Council did not want to believe. They did not want to know. But it was too late. The galaxy had forgotten about humans. Humans had not forgotten about the galaxy. And soon, their warships would darken the skies once more. The Galactic Council was in session, a grand hall filled with the leaders of the most powerful civilizations. Towering insectoid diplomats from the Tiganti swarm clicked their mandibles in irritation. The reptilian warlords of the Salvary sat in silence, their cold eyes watching every movement. The high scholars of the Velari Imperium whispered among themselves, their golden robes shimmering under the artificial light. At the center of it all, Grand Chancellor Orvik of the Galactic Council stood, his expression grim. He tapped his clawed fingers against the stone podium, signaling for silence. Captain Drelvik of the Salveri Exploration Fleet has submitted a report, Orvik said, his voice calm but firm. A report that speaks of ghosts. Murmurs spread through the hall. The very idea was ridiculous. Ghosts. No, the galaxy did not believe in such things. A Velari scholar stood. You mean the humans, Chancellor? Orvik exhaled. The myth of humans, yes. Laughter rippled through the hall. The idea that humans had once existed was an old story, one that scholars debated for centuries. Some said they were a long-lost race that had perished before recorded history. Others dismissed them as mere legend. Captain Drelvik claims his ship encountered an unidentified fleet in a dead sector. Orvik continued, and that fleet broadcasted a message in a language long forgotten. A Salveri warlord sneered. This is nonsense. The captain's mind is weak, his crew full of fools. There are no humans. There never were. Orvik hesitated. That is what we have always believed. The chamber doors hissed open. Captain Drelvik himself entered, his posture stiff, his eyes hollow. He had seen something out there. Something real. I know what I saw, he said, his voice cold. We were warned. The warlord scoffed. Warned by who? Drelvik's next words sent a chill through the entire hall. They called themselves human. Silence. The laughter died. The whispers stopped. The Velari scholar frowned. Even if such a species existed, why would they return now? After so long. Drelvik's claws tightened. I don't know. But I do know this. They were waiting. Their ships, they weren't abandoned. They were asleep. The council exchanged uneasy glances. Even the most arrogant among them could feel it. That strange, heavy weight in the air. Orvik sat back in his chair, deep in thought. Finally, he spoke. The council will investigate. The meeting was dismissed. The leaders returned to their homeworlds. But deep down, a quiet fear had begun to take root. And far beyond the borders of the known galaxy, unseen by any, something in the darkness stirred. The Salveri homeworld was a fortress. Towering citadels stretched high into the stormy skies, their armored walls gleaming under the twin suns. Warships patrolled the orbit, their weapons always ready. The Salveri prided themselves on strength, on dominance. No enemy had ever breached their defenses. Yet tonight, General Exalveth felt uneasy. Standing in the War Council chamber, surrounded by his finest officers, he replayed the intercepted transmission over and over again. The recording was distorted, ancient, but the words were unmistakable. You should not have come here. A warning. From who? His second-in-command, Krevix, growled low in his throat. These are tricks, psychological warfare. There are no humans, General. The Council wastes our time. Zalveth didn't answer. His claws tapped against the stone table as he stared at the holographic map of the dead sector. Captain Drelvik's fleet had recorded massive structures, ships larger than any known vessel in the galaxy. If this was a trick, it was a clever one. And if it wasn't, a Salveri officer shifted uneasily. If this is real, why have they waited so long? That was the question that haunted Stalveth. Why had humanity, if it still existed, chosen now to return? His thoughts were interrupted by an urgent transmission. The officer at the console paled. General, we're receiving a distress signal from Outpost Theta 7. Xalveth straightened. Put it through. The screen flickered to life. A Salveri officer, his face bloodied, gasped for breath. The feed was chaotic. Alarms blaring, lights flickering, smoke filling the air. Enemies. Everywhere. The officer choked out. Came from nowhere. No warnings. No demands. Just. A loud metallic screech cut through the transmission. The officer turned, eyes wide in horror. Then the screen went black. The War Council chamber fell silent. Krivix clenched his fists. Pirates. Some new faction testing us. We should respond with full force. Zalveth narrowed his eyes at the dead screen. Prepare the fleet. We move at dawn. He did not know what awaited them at Outpost Theta 7, but deep in his bones, he felt it. This was not a test, not a game. Something ancient had awoken, and it was watching. The fleet moved at dawn. 100 warships, each bristling with weapons, cut through the void as they approached Outpost Theta 7. General Zalveth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, eyes locked onto the dead station ahead. It was silent. No distress calls, no defense systems active, no life signs. Zalveth's claws tightened behind his back. Where are the bodies? The Salveri were warriors. They did not fear death. If the outpost had fallen, they should have seen wreckage, torn bodies, signs of a fight. But there was nothing. Krivex, his second in command, studied the scans with unease. The entire crew is gone. No escape pods were launched. No signs of struggle. Zalveth felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Something took them. His officers exchanged glances. The Salveri Empire had fought countless battles. They had seen destruction, invasions, orbital bombardments. But this was something else. A ghost war. A battle with no enemies, no survivors, just silence. A scout team was deployed. 3 gunships descended toward the station, their pilots nervous but disciplined. The moment they entered the hangar bay, the lights flickered. Then the screaming began. The transmission came through the main screen. The soldiers' cameras showed flashes of movement, shadows darting between the metal corridors, shapes too fast to follow. The sound of heavy boots, but no one was there. Then one of the soldiers turned a corner and froze. The camera feed flickered. The last thing the fleet saw before the signal cut off was a message scrawled in deep scratches on the steel wall. You were warned. Krivex's throat tightened. General. Orders. Zalveth's voice was cold. Burn it. The fleet opened fire. Plasma cannons tore through the station, reducing it to dust. That Salveri did not leave threats behind. And yet, as the flames consumed Theta 7, sensors picked up something else. Not a distress signal, not an enemy fleet, just a whisper. We remember. The fleet left, returning to the homeworld. The Council would demand answers. The galaxy would whisper. But Zalveth knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The Salveri fleet returned home in silence. Outpost Theta 7 was gone, reduced to nothing but debris. Yet despite their overwhelming firepower, despite their victory, there was no relief. Because there had been no battle. Only shadows. General Zalveth stood in the War Council chamber, facing the Galactic Council's most powerful leaders. They sat in a vast, circular hall, their holographic displays flickering with the last known images of the outpost. The message carved into the steel walls stared back at them like an open wound. You were warned. Chancellor Orvik's voice was sharp. Explain this, General. Zalveth kept his expression neutral, but deep inside, he felt something unfamiliar. Something he had not felt in decades of war. Doubt. The station was abandoned when we arrived, he said. No bodies, no survivors. We destroyed it to contain the threat. The threat of what? Orvik pressed. Ghosts, myths. Zalveth's jaw tightened. I do not believe in ghosts, Chancellor. But I do believe in warnings. And someone, something, warned us. A murmur spread through the chamber. Some dismissed it as a coincidence. Others, however, looked uneasy. A Velari scholar cleared his throat. The message, and the signal received before the station fell. It matches something found in ancient archives. A dead language, one that has not been spoken in over 10,000 cycles. Silence fell. Everyone knew what he was about to say. A Tivanti diplomat clicked his mandibles. Human. The word sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. The legends of humanity were nothing more than stories. They had never been proven real. And yet, they had been warned. Orvik exhaled slowly. We need proof. Krivex, Xalveth's second-in-command, took a step forward. We have that proof, Chancellor. He pressed a button on his datapad, and the screen above flickered. It was grainy footage, pulled from the scout team's last transmission before Theta 7 was lost. At first, it was just darkness. Then, for the briefest of moments, the screen cleared, and they saw it. A shape standing deep within the ruined station. A figure clad in dark armor, humanoid, but wrong. Taller, heavier. The camera flickered, distorting, but the shape turned, and for a second, they saw two glowing red eyes. Then the signal cut. A deathly silence filled the War Council chamber. Xalveth's voice was a whisper. They are real. Orvek's claws tapped against the table, slow and deliberate. Then the galaxy must prepare. For the first time, in thousands of years, the Council did something it had never done before. It declared a state of war. But deep in the void, beyond the reach of their fleets, unseen eyes watched their every move. And humanity waited. The declaration of war spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Every empire, every faction, every species that had once dismissed the myths of humanity now faced a terrifying truth. The whispers were real. The Council mobilized its forces. Armies assembled. Warships were called back to the core worlds. Intelligence networks scored the stars for any trace of this ancient enemy. But there was nothing. No planets, no colonies, no known homeworld. Humanity had no territory. No fleets patrolled their borders. Yet the shadows remained. General Xalveth stood aboard his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, staring at the cold expanse of space. Reports flooded in from across the sectors. Strange disappearances, entire outposts abandoned overnight, ships vanishing without distress signals. This was not a war. Not yet. This was a message. Krivex stepped beside him. The Council is losing patience. They demand a target. Xalveth exhaled slowly. And what would you have me do? Fire into the void. Krivex's jaw tightened. We are warriors, General. We do not sit in fear. We strike. A beeping sound interrupted them. A priority transmission. A holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of Chancellor Orvek. His normally composed expression was tight with tension. We found something, he said. Xalveth straightened. Where? A derelict ship drifting near the edge of the galactic core, Orvek replied. It does not match any known design. It is old, very old, and it carries something. Krivex frowned. What do you mean? Orvek hesitated. Then he gestured to someone off-screen. The display changed. It was footage from the derelict ship's interior. Dark corridors, cold metal. The ship had clearly been abandoned for centuries, maybe longer. But as the camera panned, they saw something that made their blood run cold. A figure. It was seated against the wall, its body still clad in armor that looked like it had been forged from the abyss itself. The design was unlike anything in known history, yet somehow familiar. The camera zoomed in. The helmet was cracked, revealing a glimpse of what lay beneath. Not an alien. Not a monster. A human skull. Orvek's voice was quiet. The past is not as dead as we thought. Xalveth's grip on the console tightened. The myths were real. The warnings were real. And now, they had proof. Send a recovery team, Xalveth ordered. I want that ship analyzed down to its atoms. But even as he spoke, the unease in his chest deepened. Because in the darkness of that derelict ship, there was something else. A message etched into the steel in deep jagged cuts. We NEVR left. Somewhere, out in the void, humanity was watching. And soon, they would return. The derelict ship was brought to a secure military station orbiting the Salvari homeworld. Scientists, engineers, and war analysts swarmed over it, scanning every inch, trying to understand where it had come from, and more importantly, where it had been. But the deeper they searched, the more unsettling things became. The ship was ancient, yet intact. No signs of decay, no natural corrosion. The metal was unlike anything in the known galaxy. It absorbed scans instead of reflecting them. Attempts to cut into the hull with plasma torches failed. The technology inside was beyond anything the Council had ever seen. But the strangest discovery was the body. It was human, thousands of years old, yet perfectly preserved inside the armor. A silent, eternal sentinel. Vzalveth stood before it, deep in thought. Kryvex stepped beside him. "This is no accident, General. This ship was meant to be found." Vzalveth nodded. "I know." The War Council convened once again. The chamber was silent as scientists presented their findings. "This vessel predates all recorded galactic history," one of the Velari scholars announced. "By our estimates, it is over 12,000 years old." The room tensed. That was before the founding of the Council, before the rise of the greatest empires, before any known civilization had even reached the stars. And yet, the scholar continued, its technology surpasses ours, in ways we do not yet understand. Chancellor Orvik's expression darkened. "You're telling me that humans had interstellar travel before any of us even knew what fire was?" The scholar hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Murmurs spread through the council. Some refused to believe it. Others sat in stunned silence. Then another scientist spoke. "We have also translated the logs recovered from the ship's databanks. The language is ancient, but it is unmistakably human." Orvik gestured impatiently. "What do they say?" The scientist swallowed hard. "They are coordinates." A cold silence filled the chamber. Zalveth leaned forward. "To where?" The scientist hesitated. Then, slowly, he pressed a button on his datapad. The holographic map shifted, zooming in on a region of space at the very edge of the galaxy. A dead sector. No known planets. No stars bright enough to sustain life. A place ignored for centuries because it held nothing. Or at least, that's what they had always believed. Orvik's voice was grave. "You think this is where the humans are hiding?" The scientist didn't answer. He didn't need to. Zalveth stood. "Then we go there. We take a fleet and end this mystery before it becomes a war." Orvik nodded. "Agreed. But proceed with caution, General." Zalveth turned to Kryvex. "Prepare the fleet. We leave immediately." As the warships departed, moving toward the cold, empty void, an uneasy feeling settled over them all. Because if this was truly where humanity had been waiting all these years, then the galaxy was about to learn something terrifying. The humans had never been lost. They had simply been waiting.